Welcome to the Greatest Pod, where we discuss and debate what makes something great. I'm Ron Swallow.
I'm Ed Greer. And today we're going to talk to a super cool guy I've known through the Twitter sphere for a while, but interacting with our rebooted show on YouTube and stuff. It's wild how we're connecting to do this show because I started listening to Ahch-To radio to get my Star Wars Benefides up. That's his personal podcast, and he produces for iHeartRadio. He's on air talent for a big 105.9 FM in Florida. Great friend of the show. Great to have him on. Alden Diaz.
What's going on? How's it going? We got some Ewok drums in the background. I'm sure you'll edit all that in.
Yeah,
fireworks and some lightsaber. Of course.
Jump, jump,
Yep, yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. Throwing it back to the pre special edition there, which is that conversation we will not be diving into today. We will not be dissecting every change.
You don't want to make the show McClunky?
Yeah, the McClunky. Welcome to the McClunky Hour. Which honestly, just as a quick aside before we get properly started, the fact that George sold the company and then like a time bomb years after the sale, one last change is one of the funniest things. That is the most George. It's like, they don't know I left a change on the latest A New Hope transfer. They'll find that in a few years. Like, so good.
It's like leaving some rotten fish up in the chimney of the house you just sold.
So
like,
good.
boy, in 6 months they're gonna be like, what in the fuck is going on in here?
Yeah, we're moving out. I'm not gonna bother getting the raccoons. They can. That's their problem.
Well,
That's great.
Ron is going to get a chance to talk about Star Wars because, left up to me, we probably wouldn't talk about it too much, and we'd talk about it derisively if we did, because I am an asshole. I'm what's known in the industry as an asshole. I have talked a lot about Star Wars, but I'm glad that Ron will have a chance to talk to somebody who loves Star Wars as much or more than he does.
Yeah, I about 15 of the books back there are the Star Wars novels that I have. I don't have a lot of the new stuff yet. I have all of the now what is referred to what is Legacy, right?
The Legends, yeah.
The Legends version, yeah. But I love Star Wars. I grew up on it. I have some opinions about the prequels, and they've softened over the years. Interesting, and I don't want to get off in a weird tangent, but like I think that it helped. Actually, we talk about this a lot. Iterative fiction is great because a lot of times people take what was made and they build a little bit more and they build a little bit more. So like Anakin's going to the dark side makes a lot more sense when you start watching the Clone Wars cartoon.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Whereas it doesn't make any sense when you watch just the prequels. But when you combine all of the stuff that exists, you're like, oh, okay, well, now I see how he got sucked in and how if you lived in chaos, like you might really, really want there to be less of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's going to be a huge theme in this entire conversation is like what I call like the tapestry view of Star Wars, where it kind of comes from growing up reading like Big Two comics and things like that, but also just from growing up as a prequel kid who then went through that 10-year period where there was nothing, but then coming out of high school was the build to Force Awakens for me, because I graduated high school in 2014, and then that fall we got the Thanksgiving teaser where we first saw Rey and we first saw BB-8 and Finn. So I've always had a Star Wars experience that had a lot of elements to it, whereas I think that some people, they're like, oh, well, I went through 83 to 99 where there was nothing. And so there was a really solidified view of what it was. My view of Star Wars was always, and we'll add a little bit of this, we'll add a little bit of that. And so it just was always changing. So when you add something like a Clone Wars or like a Star Wars Rebels, which is one of my favorite things in Star Wars.
It's great.
It's so good. Yeah. Or even like the new like Light of the Jedi, like High Republic books I got up here, like those books, which you would love around because they're super Star Wars by way of fantasy, by way of like Arthurian stuff and things like that.
Ooh.
All of that stuff, I'm constantly like, here's the new piece. How does it inform everything after and everything before? And I love the dissection of like the behind the scenes. I love knowing why George did this, why, you know, Ryan Johnson or J.J. Abrams did this or that. But the thing about it is that for me, that's also not story. That's a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
Because we let the original trilogy live for so long in our society that we don't question things anymore, like the fact that clearly the sibling relationship was not planned.
No,
we don't
clearly
reflect on things like clearly Vader was not here until Empire was in rewrites. And there are things like that that we just know, but we don't hold it against those. And I try to give that same benefit to the modern Star Wars now, because it's going to be like that in 20 years. 20 years time, so, you know, some young girl now, later young lady who might even be in the industry, is going to say, yeah, I mean, I know that like Rey's heritage wasn't planned, but I saw that when I was a kid. It rocked. We analyze it this way, that way, the other way. So everything changes, and the people that, you know, love to moan about it don't really tend to embrace the actual lessons that are in it.
Okay, fair enough. So, just out of curiosity, how did you get started liking Star Wars in the first place?
So it was, yeah, it was one of those things where it was like always sort of there, which is such a generic answer, but it was, you know, like my mom wasn't really into like sci-fi fantasy and stuff, but she had a few brothers who all were, and we always had access to, you know, the silver slipcase 3 VHS special editions, and then the prequels were coming out. And so when I was born, you know, we were a couple of years away from Phantom Menace, but I was too young to see that in theaters. So Attack of the Clones was my first one in theaters, and I was such an Anakin mark. I thought he was just the coolest thing I'd ever seen. It was like Anakin and Wolverine, because we had those things both booming really at the same time.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, what a spoiled. I was talking about it with a friend the other day. Like, we had Fellowship of the Ring, Raimi Spider-Man, you know, Attack of the Clones, all in like a 2-year span. Sorcerer's Stone, or Philosopher's Stone if you're in the UK. All of those things were booming at the same time. So it was really spoiled, but Star Wars had this air, which Marvel Comics also had for me, of, oh, the adults know about this too. You know, the adults, like, they care about it. And in a way that they liked X-Men, they liked Spider-Man. They, you know, I watched Voyager on TV with my mom sometimes because it came after Frasier. So my mom would watch Frasier, and then she would stomach a Voyager because she didn't really care about sci-fi. But Star Wars was that thing where, like, even my mom was like, "Oh yeah, Harrison Ford." Like, yeah, I remember. I saw him. And to have all the adults around you interested is weird. And so then I had this walkie-talkie set of a Stormtrooper and a Vader helmet. I was playing with the Vader helmet, whatever, you know, doing the voice. And then Phantom Menace was on the TV one day, and I think it was one of my cousins that said, "You know, that little boy is that helmet." And I was like, what? No. What do you mean? And they were like, he became that later on. We haven't seen the full thing yet, but they're going to make more movies. And that's when I was like, oh God, we're going to see him turn into a monster. Like, that completely changed everything and really informed my view of it, because I was always looking ahead. So I was on StarWars.com as a 5th grader, Revenge of the Sith trailer, like, oh my God, like, this is gonna be, oh, I saw lava in the trailer, he's gonna burn, like, this is it, this is the moment. So it's always been like reading a history book for me.
Well, yeah, I wanted to talk about that. When you said it's kind of like always been some sort of it's like a crappy generic. I wanted to talk about how you were saying it's a generic answer to say that Star Wars was always there, because it's generic, because it's super true for like generations of people.
Yeah.
And there's ubiquitousness and inevitability. Like Star Wars, I mean, Thanos has nothing on the inevitability of Star Wars. Star Wars will get in your bloodstream no matter who you are, because people will get mad at me for hating Star Wars so much, supposedly, but like, I got True Bakura right there. I got all type of Timothy Zahn joints with the old school Jedi. I mean, the old school Sith dudes, the clones shooting lightning out of their hands on the cover, you know, covering planets and force lightning and crazy crap. I got all those books, but I think Marvel stole me away in the night, because when I was like, oh, if I'm gonna like one of these things and put a lot of effort into knowing all the different characters and planets and everything, like Marvel was my joint. I was like, I love the street level guys like the Punisher. I like the swinging above the street level guys like Daredevil and Spider-Man. I want to learn everything about them. And then I watched the comic, and I've said this many times, but I think Daredevil and Spider-Man were eating a sandwich watching all the rest of the heroes fight Galactus because it was too much above them to be fucking around over there. They knew they couldn't do anything. So they just stayed the hell out of it. The fact that a world could be that big and that much bigger than these super cool guys who kicked a lot of ass that I loved, it just blew my mind. And I just started just reading, just getting so into it. But even by osmosis, I know almost everything about Star Wars to a reasonable degree because it's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I realized as a kid how much it had informed everything before I even knew what it meant for art to inform art. I wasn't yet going to the Joseph Campbell books or the the documentaries and learning about how Luke on the homestead is the Searchers, or learning about Yojimbo, or learning about all that stuff yet. But what I was seeing was Toy Story 2 doing its own version of I Am Your Father. And as a kid, when Emperor Zurg is telling Buzz Lightyear, I'm your father, I was like, wait a second. Other movies can take parts of other movies? And that immediately informed me about how important it was for everything. And then growing up and, my stepdad and my mom watching Family Guy and seeing how much it informed McFarlane about how not only did he have 3 whole specials about it, but, there's bits all over. And obviously Seth Green, and just seeing how it was allowed to be everything and allowed to inform everything. I grew up a huge Kevin Smith fan, and it's in all his work. And so it just, it's crazy. I mean, again, like you're saying, like even people that legitimately don't like it know it, at least to a certain degree.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to avoid. And it's interesting because it's simultaneously still counted as nerd culture while also being probably the best-selling blockbuster movies of all time by far. Even I guess Marvel is competitive, obviously, but like they're on it's a crazy thing because in 9 movies they have some of the best-selling thing of all time, the most influence on culture of all time, but at the same time it's still considered a sort of subculture to be super into it at the same time. So that's fascinating to me, because a lot of times if you're into Godfather, you're not considered a nerd.
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost like it has this weird sort of like, not, I don't like the tiers of like, that's a hardcore fan, that's a casual fan, but there is a little bit of that. And even if the labels probably could be better, but the idea that it's sort of like, like your rebooted co-host, who I'm a fan of, Billy Business, like he's a big Kiss fan, I'm a big Kiss fan. Star Wars is kind of like Kiss in that way, where it's been merched as everything and it's the biggest of what it is, even if people think it's simplistic or don't really like it. But at the same time, there's also that sub language in both of them, and probably with every band, I'm sure. I know Beatles fans have this too, where it's like, I love Twist and Shout, I love Come Together, but then there are Beatles fans that are like, but what about like Rubber Soul? Like, what about, all of this stuff that you're not talking about? So there's, when I was working at a Trader Joe's for a while, sometimes I would have like Star Wars pins or whatever, like on my gear or whatever. Sure. And people would, oh, you're a Star Wars fan? I'd be like, yeah, well, I'm bringing up their bananas. And they're like, did you like that new one? I thought it was okay. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, I'm sort of past the new one already. All right, I've already read about 12 comics since that came out. And you try not to be pretentious about it, but it's like, buddy, you're not ready for Mandalorian. You're not ready for all this other stuff. It's like, do you really want to talk about Star Wars, or are you just trying to relate to your cashier?
That's so funny, man. And that's one thing I wanted to talk about in regards to your particular. I'm interested in how you see stuff, because I'm not a big fan of telling people how old I am, because black don't crack. But you are significantly younger than the rest of this panel, and it's funny. It's like, I don't think that a younger people have as much trouble with the new hotness as older people do, because I think they're not. It's not so much you weren't 7 fucking years old in 1977 looking up at the screen to seeing Skywalker for the first time. You're not that, and on a certain level, that is like for them the beyond reproach fan. They saw it first at an age where they could understand it and enough for it to get into their spine like meningitis and carry out throughout the rest of their whole lives. They saw the whole thing play all the way out, and then they saw us double back, and then they saw us go forward, and they're just like their minds are swimming, you know. And I'm not that generation, thank God, because I would be like tethered to this in a way that I'm deep in nerd culture, but I'm orbiting Star Wars culture. I mean, I got a damn Star Wars head in my house, and I try to make sure she doesn't bite me like those people who keep the zombies in Walking Dead. They just sort of keep them in a shed somewhere. I got a Star Wars head in my house, and
you're like, sure I could turn them back. I'm waiting for a cure.
Yeah. The CDC got some hot shit coming down. But anyway, all that to say, the Star Wars, the iterative nature of Star Wars and comic books, like we talked in our Twitter conversation about New 52. I am old enough that I couldn't fuck with New 52. I couldn't. I really couldn't. And I saw how when they were trying to put it back together, and they were saying that basically Batman's like history is too important for us to go 0 hour on it. So we're just going to sort of, he's been around such and such amount of time, and these other people, they just sort of rejiggered it to where Batman could still have his history, but still be introducing himself to every goddamn body as well.
Exactly. Like they made it seem like your Nightfall, like your Night Quest, your No Man's Land, every epic Batman story ever told happened, I think, in 5 years, at least when New 52 started. So it was like, you've had the most epic, wicked 5 years ever, and the JLA hasn't formed yet. Like it just, trying to have your cake and eat it too. I mean, it's also like adjusting what war Frank Castle fought in, or like constantly moving him up the timeline. And I think now he's like a Desert Storm, Desert Shield veteran or something. And now always trying to find a way how Magneto could have survived the concentration camps, but still be a buff, Silver Fox daddy in 2021. Like
dude, yeah, he was at Dachau, and he looks like Richard Gere right now.
Wild.
Yeah, the magnetism, man. The magnetism just helped him stay young. Don't you understand? That's like it made his
vitalized.
It made his cells age differently. That's what all that happened. Yeah. It's not regeneration like Wolverine, but it's close to that. Yeah.
I just got to build that in for every mutant. But what you're saying is so true. I mean, I think that there are 3 types of overarching Star Wars fandom, one of which is not me saying I know the right way to be a fan, but I'm saying there is the one glorious world of all these perspectives and people that love Star Wars. Then there's 2 sort of like offshoots, both of which I think are paths to the dark side. And the first one is being more a fan of Star Wars fandom than you are of Star Wars, which is dangerous. Like there are some people that have their own Star Wars podcasts or their own projects or their own fan fiction or their own whatever. And this is a thing in everything. You guys both doing comedy. I'm sure there's people like this where you start to drink your own Kool-Aid and you're a fan of yourself more than you're a fan of making comedy. And I think that there's a lot of that in Star Wars communities. Go ahead. Sorry.
I 100% agree with that. I was just going to I've probably used this multiple times, but I think Dane Cook is the perfect example of that. When Dane Cook first came out, while I was never a huge fan of Dane Cook, he was good at what he did. And then he became a fan of himself and started doing a copy of what Dane Cook used to be. And it was weird. He's just like, this is what I'm supposed to do, so I'm doing it.
And I was, again, like, I was in middle school when Vicious Circle came out, and we all thought Dane was like the second coming of Christ. Like, we thought he was the funniest thing we'd ever seen as a bunch of 11 and 12-year-olds. Then we got to Isolated Incident, and we were like, he's kind of a bro now. It's a little weird. And then you start to realize that it starts to eat itself in a certain way, which all fandoms can do. But there are definitely Star Wars fans, like some people that hated Last Jedi, but love Rise of Skywalker, or vice versa. And that's been interesting, is people that were bullied for liking Last Jedi, but now poop on J.J. Abrams for Rise of Skywalker. It's like, you forgot sort of what you went through, or prequel kids that bully sequel kids is hilarious. Like, because like, did you forget that you had the most maligned blockbusters possibly ever outside of like some of the bad X-Men movies? But and then there's this other dark side offshoot, which is something that I know that you guys have talked about on Reboot It and on Greatest Pod, which is people being more invested in their memory than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, are you a fan of Luke Skywalker, the flawed mythic hero in the tradition of guys like Frodo, or are you a fan of what you remember? Are you a fan of Han Solo, the goofball who's always yes-anding and trying to make it seem like he has an aura about him that he really doesn't have, and always chooses friendship in the end? Or is it your memories of this badass that you created in your mind over time? Same with Empire Strikes Back, constantly being remembered as this dark, heavy Star Wars film. And it is thematically, but it's also the most romantic. It's got some of the silliest beats. Like the let us not forget that Vader's revelation with Luke is followed quickly by C-3PO yelling in pieces on Chewbacca's back while they're running around. Like, there's Ugnaughts playing catch with parts, and like it's got some of the most weird Star Wars flavor. Like, is this a hole? No, it's a worm. Okay, cool. We're moving on. But we get attached to memories, so that's why you get debates about like Last Jedi Luke. Would he ever do that? And I'm like, yeah, watch his whole training with Yoda. This is 100% how that guy would act in his 60s. 100%.
Yeah, I actually had no problem with that. But I think it's a danger, though, because when I was a kid, when I first saw that first Spider-Man, my attachment was to comic book Spider-Man. And I felt like that movie was not like comic book Spider-Man at all.
Yeah.
And it bothered me a ton. And it bothered me partly because I feel like it changed part of the character, because to me, one of the most important parts of the character is that he's super smart and that he solves this web problem with his brain. And that's what he does, So like, I had these complaints about that sort of thing. But the more I think about that stuff as I've gotten older and talked with these guys a little bit more, the more silly I think that is. I still do the joke that I do because it's a great joke. And sometimes you just got to do great jokes. But it is silly to not look at things in a more expansive way. And that's why I'm super interested in seeing your view on the new the new movies, the sequels.
Right.
And you, I assume, saw them all in the theater?
Yep. Yeah, I saw them all in the theater. All of them, including Rogue One and Solo, at least 4 times a piece. I think the least I saw them was 4. I think I saw Rogue One probably 4 times. And then, yeah, Force Awakens I saw like 7 or 8 times. That and Avengers are probably the most I've seen one thing in theaters, which is not a lot. I mean, there are people that I know someone that saw Phantom Menace over 60 times.
Wow.
In theaters.
Wow. Wow. That's
I mean, I worked at a movie theater during Phantom Menace, and I still only saw it like 6 or 7 times.
Yeah.
And I got to see it for free.
So like, these are I have low viewing numbers theatrically, but it's always like, that's the preferred background noise, like I'll always have some sort of Star Wars on in my day, even if it's like an audiobook or a podcast of another Star Wars fan or something like that. So
okay, cool.
And see, and that's I kind of wanted to talk to you about that sort of thing, because I think the only thing I'm a fan that much of is like NBA basketball, which makes me this weird nerd. Like, I'm in a tier with about 5,000 other dudes. Most of those guys like anime too, and I'm like, nope, I don't like anime. So I'm away from those guys. I'm like a subdivision of a subdivision of a subdivision with that sort of thing. But I will say, I am old enough to bristle, just to take it back to Spider-Man really quickly as an aside. I'm old enough to be mad that he is so on Tony Stark's dick in the movies. Like, now that I've seen the whole thing play out and been able to just like it in its time, but then do that fan thing where you start going over and over and over again and picking at it. And I don't like it. I get why they did it. And I am not a person who says it's a mistake. I am saying that understanding those two things, I don't like it.
Yeah,
because
for
it
your
takes
tastes and
for my taste.
Which is, yeah, I think that's a thing that I have with Christopher Nolan's Bruce Wayne,
Ah,
where
Yep.
Nolan's Bruce Wayne, even though I think 2 out of the 3 of those movies, Rises aside, just for me, it are works of genius. His Bruce is a group project between Ra's al Ghul, Bruce Wayne, Lucius Fox, Gordon. Like, it's a
Mm-hmm.
concerted effort rather than this mythic man who, and seeing the Matt Reeves keeps talking about how the Batman is going to be very crime drama, and it's going to be very much about this man and his experiment and all this stuff. So rad. But I guess sort of like the advent, we were talking a little bit off air about like the advent of growing up. I've never not known the internet. And so always being exposed to multiple versions has really changed my palette in a lot of ways where, I talked about X-Men and like Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. I was watching X2 in theaters, seeing that epic, Mozart's Requiem Nightcrawler sequence at the beginning of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And then later that day, I was watching X-Men Evolution, and I was seeing the high school versions of these same characters, and Wolverine being like, Bub, I'm a chaperone, Bub, like that type of stuff. And the way that it sort of changed my ability to say, oh, well, that's just that version, or that's just that version. And now I think these kids, the Spider-Verse kids, and if rumors are to be believed, live action stuff, and Keaton's Batman mixing with the Snyder Flash, mixing with Batfleck, like all the stuff that's happening now, I don't think these kids in 10 years are ever going to say, oh, well, like I think they're going to have a very open attitude because they've seen it all represented. Going from Toby to Andrew Garfield to Tom Holland and Spider-Man has been really interesting. Same as moving through Batman's, because it's like, oh, they're doing a new take. Oh, I wonder if this is going to be the one where he's actually a detective. I wonder if this is going to be the one where he's actually a scientist. And then it's like, oh, they did make him a science guy, but he's Tony Stark's apprentice. Oh, maybe next time they'll do, a solo science guy, and he'll be more poor, and he'll be. So it's just constantly
Exactly.
like riffing and seeing like what version you're going to get next. And it's also kind of like that, to tie it back into Star Wars, where, you know another project's on the horizon, and you're kind of like, what flavor of Star Wars is going to be. Even though it never reboots, it definitely goes through its different cycles, and we're seeing sort of how things have changed. So,
But the person I think, I just wish if I could go back and take a take two on Star Wars' whole mythos, I wish Han Solo was more important to the entire thing. Because he's very important to the original trilogy, and he's important in some ways to the sequel trilogy. But I feel like Han Solo was to me probably the character that I probably was on the tail end of those generations that made up a badass in their head for Han
yeah.
Solo. I bet I'm a tail end of one of those, because just like everybody was I have always been the guy who's like, hey, all these magic fucks are running around, and there's one guy like me who puts his pants on without levitating them onto his Johnson. You know what I mean? That's that. I've always been that guy. If there's 5 super dudes, give me the guy with the grappling hook every fucking time. That's me.
Yeah.
I'm a mark for that stuff. And I just think that I like him. I like the Mandalorian. I'm like way up that situation's ass, which brings me to one of my quibbles with the prequels that I want. I mean, rather with the sequels that I want you to help me work through.
Sure.
And that is, I saw Finn as one of those. I saw Finn as one of those that Han Solo lineage of. I always got that he wasn't quite as put together as he thought he was, or rather as he was trying to project that he was.
Right.
He was overcompensating for how insecure he always felt, because he was a real guy in a fantasy situation. I could get my arms chopped off by laser swords. I could get shot by laser blasters. So he was just sort of. I remember that time he ran around the corner in Jedi with like he was shooting, or rather, I don't know which movie it was. I remember they're all blended together, but he runs around the corner shooting, and they're all come flooding in and chase him back around. I think it might have happened a couple times to him. That sort of thing, I just love that, and I saw it in Finn a bit. Like, hey man, I got just enough knowledge about shit to get along in this world. I'm just smart enough. I got just enough resources to get along in this world. Right. And I was just like so primed for some great adventure with him. and I did not get it by any stretch of my imagination, my
Right.
taste. So help me work through that with the sequels, because I understand you like the sequels quite a bit, and I kind of like them more than the prequels and more than the first and third original sequels. I like them more.
Interesting. Okay, so when it comes to Finn is an interesting case because, and like you said, like expectations is a huge part of it. And the degree to which we can all sort of separate ourselves from our expectations is it's always a battle. It's always a challenge, and it always takes a lot. Like we're hearing a lot about this Amazon Lord of the Rings show right now, and I'm like, okay, but if it's not in the Peter Jackson canon, I'm gonna relax. If it's not like if they don't try to use if Rivendell looks different, or if it's not blah 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 blah. Same with how there's gonna be now Game of Thrones prequels and things. I'm just trying to say like this is this world through this person's lens. So when it came to JJ and working with the character of Finn, it's interesting to me that you say you saw Finn in the tradition of Han, because there are so many people, especially fans of color, and especially Black male fans, that saw themselves in Finn, that saw him on the posters with the Anakin Luke blade, the Skywalker saber, and they felt cheated in the other direction of we thought this man was going to be the mythic hero. And so there's a lot of that conversation. So you're actually, this is the first time I've spoken to another fan who feels the other way. And so he sort of exists, with your argument now in this middle of what is Finn. And I think that what's interesting about him is that Poe Dameron and Leia come from similar traditions of, they're already entrenched in this battle before we meet them. And when we meet them, they are the embodiment of good establishment. And then with Rey and Luke, obviously that's your mythic tradition, and Finn rides that line a little later on, with the context that he's a Force sensitive. But what was cool about him, and something that Lawrence Kasdan emphasized a lot, is that he was the most whole cloth of the new creations, outside of, I guess, BB-8, who was a new design. But as a character template, there hadn't been a deserter, defector type character. We hadn't seen, unless you were reading novels and stuff or comics, we hadn't seen under the helmet of one of the automatons. And so to see Finn sort of have that, doesn't really know how to be. He's constantly trying to hold Rey's hand because he just thinks that's how you act. Like, and what does an indoctrinated person do when they suddenly have a name? Like, we see him get named by this guy that he just met. So he's sort of like the most, to me, embodiment of like Star Wars choice. And I think that there's for me, a misunderstanding, I think, of you hear a lot, oh, Last Jedi Finn, like it just repeats the beats of Force Awakens. But not really, because Force Awakens is the story of this guy becoming more than an automaton and investing in new mentorship through Han, new friendships through Rey and Chewie, being accepted in by Finn and Leia, and realizing that I'm more than just this mask, which is why I love, like, there's so many of the themes of Lucas are the organic versus the technological. And we have never, outside of one or two other moments, New Hope has one where Obi-Wan cuts off Ponda Baba's arm in the cantina. You see blood there because they hadn't really thought yet that lightsabers should cauterize blood, so they just wrote an explanation for that later. You see blood in Force Awakens, which is rare for this series. And you see it with those streaks of the stormtrooper that died alongside Finn in the Jakku village. And that became such an iconic image for, those toys and things like that, is that Finn was reminded in a harsh way that, oh God, we are people under here. So that movie for me does play sort of in that tradition of I am a regular guy trying to figure out who I am. And people have said, oh, well, he committed at the end. Why does he have to commit again? He didn't commit at the end of Force Awakens. Force Awakens is, how do I learn to value myself and people? It's a people thing for Finn. He tells Han, I didn't come to Starkiller Base to save the day. I just came here for Rey. She's the only person that's ever treated me like a person. And not even in a romantic way. I mean, it's like, I always say that, Han is Chewie's adopted dog. Like these are these creatures that you show kindness to, these beings, and Finn was one of those. And then Last Jedi is, okay, I've accepted that people matter, and I know now that people matter, but now it's about the cause. And so he's leveling up in that way of, first I gained humanity and now I gain ideology. So I think that Finn, more so than any other Star Wars character, at least of the new era, is, and I think Din Djarin in Mandalorian has this too, because he also had to go from my life is very A to B to, oh God, nuance. Like there's so much more going on here. I think that Finn definitely rides that line. And then by Rise of Skywalker, he is a general, and he's finally committed to the cause, and he's embraced it, and he can now lead with his own personality in a way that none of the stormtroopers were ever capable of, which is why it's cool to see him, fight and defeat Phasma, and why, even though he does get that Force sensitivity revealed, he feels Rey die, and he sort of, he has all these inklings and stuff. It's very much in the Leia tradition, like it mirrors like that. You have a role to play, but he's not mythical. So I don't know if any of that necessarily makes you feel better, but I just think that it's sort of like looking to him specifically in the Han tradition is very difficult, because he is the one that kind of doesn't fit any tradition. He's the most, I think, new cloth of them all. Whereas Poe is sort of Han and Leia's thematic kid in a way, because he has Leia's journey, but he also has to get broken in similar ways to Han, because Poe has to learn. Force Awakens, he doesn't really have an arc because he wasn't supposed to make it in that movie. We all know that. That's one of those things where it's like you have to address the behind the scenes. Poe was supposed to be dead. And then Oscar Isaac was like, hey, can I not die? And JJ was like, I really like you. And they just added more Poe. But in Last Jedi, Poe has to learn that heroics and heroism are not the same thing. Yeah. Being a hero is about making calculated calls for the betterment of those around you, setting an example. That's why Leia tells him there were heroes on that mission, but no leaders. And Poe has to learn sort of his own part of the Han Solo lesson. And so I think that with him, he's more that regular guy, even though he has hotshot, training and things like that.
Yeah, super pilot.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay. So one of the things we love to talk about on Reboot It is theme. What do you think the theme of the sequels are?
It's a really good question, and it lets me invoke grumpy Harrison Ford, which I love to do. Which is and it's interesting because Harrison signing on for the sequels, I think, was a thing that certainly people older than me probably never expected. It was a thing that I grew up hearing. Alec Guinness doesn't really like Star Wars. Harrison Ford doesn't really like Star Wars. You only saw Harrison really at like charity screenings every now and then, if that, for the kids. But then him signing on was a big thing for Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher. Like, if Harrison's doing it, then we should probably have a serious talk about it. And I remember on the press tour for Force Awakens, he said at San Diego Comic-Con 2015, somebody asked what's going to be the theme of these new ones. And he said, I'm not sure if it's about selecting new themes so much as it is about an extension of theme. And so when you look at the entire saga as this one story, whether, it was intended to be that way or not, whether George was going to do his microbiotic look at the Force or whatever he had said he would do with 7, 8, and 9, he said about 100 different things. The charm of the sequels to me, and the theme and sort of the juice, is that it is about not just sins of the father, but sins of the parent generation, and about how we let things fester, and about how that affects the youth. And tying in with J.J. Abrams's original, because J.J. didn't want to take the job. Spielberg had pushed for him to, be the choice, and obviously he has a relationship with Kathy Kennedy. What got J.J., and he's gone on about this several times, which I've always loved, is what fascinated him is the idea of a young woman out there that didn't know who Luke Skywalker was outside of legend. And so it's about that shadow of everything hanging over. And, you know, whether people like Palpatine's return or don't like Palpatine's return, whether it's Palpatine, Snoke, Kylo Ren, anything in that dark side section of things, you can sort of see how relevant it is to now, in the same way that the Battle of Endor is like Vietnam, where now you have Ben Solo, a youth turned the wrong way by what exactly? Oh, it's the lingering specter of the old men that came before that won't go away. You know, you're very relevant to now, you know, McConnell types, Lindsey Graham types, your Jeff Sessions types, like those guys that you're like, wait a second, didn't, you know, Martin Luther King's entire family disavow this man and he still has a job? You know, he still gets to make policy decisions. So these things still festering like an open wound out there that we've denied and said were gone because we had one victorious run. It's the idea to me of, what does it take for the youth to build upon the parent generations to actually finally put things to bed, which is why I feel like the sequels are a perfect follow-up to all of the movies, but really the original trilogy, because, and that's one of the hotter takes that I have, is that you look at Palpatine and the way that he's defeated both times. And people say, like, does his return undermine Return of the Jedi? I would say, does the Second World War undermine the people that fought in the first one? Does the fact that Sauron came back in the events of The Hobbit and Fellowship, does that undermine what Elrond went through 3,000 years before? I think that the idea that something is only defeated once, never read a Marvel or DC comic if that bothers you. I'll tell you that.
Galactus keeps coming back, you guys.
They won't go away. This Joker guy is not going anywhere.
Well, let me jump in right here though, because sure. I think that goes to my take on what the whole things are, which is what we, in my mind, rectified in our rebooted of Star Wars, which was Billy saw it at the time, and you can go back and look at the rebooted episode of Star Wars. Billy and I get into it because he keeps dragging fucking Palpatine up, and I'm like, we're rebuilding this from the atoms up. And you want to keep Palpatine in it? I hate this. And that's how a lot of people responded to him showing up and having a specter over the sequels. And what I would say is this: if we just accept this as canon, which it is because it's the movies, then the whole damn thing is the rule of two. This whole shebang is a result of the rule of two. What Sith guy training his apprentice, hoping that he gets so great at his job that he kills him later. Weird concept, but that's what it is. And it seems like the Skywalker clan and the Palpatine clan have been more or less trying to rule of two this whole time, in that who are the significant people in the universe for this entirety of the period? The Skywalker clan. Who is the other most influential people in this universe? Palpatine and his line. And it's these two families, whether it's them actually Capulet and Montaguing up. No, it's not that. But it is an undercurrent throughout this entirety of the thing. And then at the end, the Skywalker clan wins because one of the Palpatines wants to be a Skywalker. And that's the end of the enmity between the Capulets and the Montagues, is that the final family wins by adoption, by being good guys who are willing to take in, rather than being part of a fascist force that decides to push away.
Yeah,
that's my thought.
Yeah, there's definitely something to that, which I like that you brought up with the idea of, we're not going to hold against you the darkness that came before you, which is something that definitely is embedded, especially into the prequels. Like, even Anakin's first day, he's doing his little test of, how telepathic is this young boy, and immediately they're like, your thoughts dwell on your mother. Yikes. Like, they show no compassion, no ability to take in, and how that informs everything. But I'll build on what you said, because when you look at the Star Wars mythology, especially now with like expanded canon and stuff, like, we're getting books that are set 200 years before, and there's all this stuff. And for that, like, 70 years in galactic history, it is this battle, like you said, between Palpatine and his family, and how this one evil fascist sorcerer plagues this family. And what I think is, what I push back on is this idea that his return, or depending on how you want to word it, his never having been gone, just, undermines the original trilogy. What I love about it is that it's about how the heroes win. And one thing I love about Star Wars Rebels is that Ezra Bridger, the young protagonist of that show, talks to Yoda in a scene and sort of tells him, a lot of the insecurity that Star Wars fans have had about Jedi Knights and stuff, which is, you say, it's not about attack, it's not about adventure, excitement, but at the same time, are we just supposed to not fight? And Yoda says, no, it's about how. And when you look at how Palpatine was defeated in Return of the Jedi, it's a really powerful moment for Luke to have faith in the fact that there was a flicker of light in his dad. But it's really, it's a redemptive moment only for Luke, because Vader's not redeemed in the eyes of the galaxy. You have helped your son. You proved that you had humanity left. You didn't suddenly truly become a hero again. And when there was just those 3 movies, or even with 6 movies, it was easy to say, like, and then, the father and the son, they defeated Palpatine, et cetera, et cetera. With the entire context implemented onto it, and the full relationship of the stories, you can sort of see that Palpatine was defeated on the day through an act of violence by somebody that was on their last gasp to prove that they were still a human. It's not really as triumphant as maybe you think. And Luke can go tell people, and that's great, but it's not going to make a difference to anybody. That's still a fascist that destroyed worlds. And even Leia, in expanded canon, that tanks her political career, is that somebody leaks who her father was in Claudia Gray's bloodline. And that becomes a huge thing. And she has always wrestled with that. And that's part of why her Jedi training, went off the rails, that she had visions of her son, dying and all this stuff. And that side of her lineage, the mystical side, has always plagued Leia to a certain degree. Then you flash forward to Rise of Skywalker, a film that was not at all controversial in any way. You have instead a Jedi hero informed by Luke and Leia, and really everyone that came before, as we see in the Rise scene. She defeats Palpatine having already embraced humanity before she walked into the room. She's been reconciling with, at first it was, I just want belonging, I feel abandoned. And then it was, the belonging you seek is ahead of you, as Maz tells her. Then in the 8th one, it's reconciling with the fact that you are the main character. That's the point of Last Jedi Rey, is trying to hand the saber to Luke. He didn't want it. I try again. He doesn't want it. Oh, maybe Ben will take it if I reach out to him. Oh, he's doubling down on all his problems. I guess I'm the lead, is what she has to accept. She's the most, humility is her strength. Luke Skywalker, and people always push back on Force Awakens for being a rehash of New Hope. And one of the things that I violently push back on that point with is, her and Luke are not parallels, they're inverses. Luke Skywalker always accepted that he was the A character. I want to go with you to Alderaan and become a Jedi like my father. He's always been down to clown the guy. He's Red 5, he's Rogue Leader, he's General Skywalker, strolling into Jabba's palace. He's had his moments of weakness, and they normally come from, he believes in himself, he doesn't believe in the power of the Force, which is what Yoda challenges him with Dagobah. Always with you, it cannot be done, all these different things. Rey is the inverse. She believes in the power of the Force. She clearly knows and enjoys the legends. She's excited just to hear about Luke Skywalker. She knows about Jedi powers. Oh, they can make things float, right? And Luke rolls his eyes at her because she believes in the power of the Force, but not herself. And so it presents this other side of the journey where she's not a Luke clone, thematically. She's the Luke, the other side of that coin. She's the Luke complement. And how does she defeat Palpatine is by defending, by being resilient. Like, her victory isn't based on the last gasp of somebody who, what's the best way to say it? It's not based on the last gasp of somebody who struggled with the themes. She has completed her journey and goes in there resolute, blocks the lightning, never even attacks one of his guards. All she does in that scene is deflect. She's deflecting blaster bolts, force pushing people away. She's just trying to show that she won't hate. And even when it comes down to blades up, you're lightning, she's just going to take it all. That way everyone above her can succeed. And so it's a leveling up of themes in a certain way, where it's like Luke Skywalker, circa Mandalorian, as much as we love seeing him save Grogu, he's an ass kicker. You know, like he's gotten to that point where he is there to wreck shop. That child needs help. I will mow everything down on this ship to get there. And we love him for it. It's not a bad thing. But if Rey had gotten there and mowed down all of Palpatine's guards and then just beheaded the old man, like, what have you really accomplished? What have you become? There's no next thing. So I love that kids now can see Palpatine defeated out of desperation and pain, and then defeated because we really have grown past you. And the fact that we've now finally really grown past you and we're not playing on your terms anymore, we're playing on ours, is why we win. And I think that's a huge thing with that movie and with the sequels in general. The original trilogy and the prequels put a lot of pressure on these heroes. But then you have old Billy D. Williams coming in and telling Poe, no, we won because we had each other.
Yeah.
And then it's, okay, well, so Poe, you've been struggling with leadership. You don't have to be the one general. They become co-generals. You go back to Phantom Menace, you know, Anakin and Shmi are slaves. She imparts in him, like, the biggest problem with the galaxy is nobody helps each other. And then in Rise, for the first time in any canon Star Wars story, it's the people that show up. When he says, hey, you shush. Take a treat. Take a treat. Got dog treats sitting here. When you have this story that finally the people actually show up for the first time. You know, General Pride, played by Richard E. Grant, who is of the old guard. You know, he hints that he used to work for Palpatine, and has pledged himself to that evil. He says, who are all these ships? They have no navy. And the guy says, it's not the navy, it's people. And they're weirded out by that. And that's why I think it's sort of this climax of the lessons have set in.
Well, yeah. And I think one of that's actually, so I have a lot of problems with the last movie. I actually love Last Jedi and I love Force Awakens, which I think apparently is weird that I like both of those. Supposedly that's not supposed to happen.
You're not supposed to like any of them in harmony with any of them.
Yeah.
You can only pick one.
Yeah. So, and I didn't hate Rise of Skywalker. There were just, I had a lot of problems with certain things and I felt like they broke some rules and et cetera, but that doesn't matter. What I did like the whole time was I do love the idea of community being the thing that defeats evil, because I do think that that's one of the key things, because to me, the more I look at society currently right now, the more I see how relevant that is.
Yeah.
For us to defeat people who are literally believing in the most insane shit on the planet right now, the only way to do it is for us all to come together as a community of relatively intelligent, kind people with empathy and stand up to them. It's the best Superman stories, by the way. The best Superman story is not ever when Superman punches a guy into the moon or repeatedly talks about like, oh, I have to be super careful all the time so I don't destroy everything, even though that's a fun little thing. It's when he stands up and never backs down to the evil of Darkseid, because Darkseid he wins the more you stand up, the more you fight him, but the more you stand up to him, the weaker he gets. And to me, that's the same type of theme they did here, was a theme of coming together and believing in each other and in community. And sure, one person can inspire lots of people to do that. And I think that was part of Rey's thing, was inspiring tons of people to come to their side. Like, you're right, we've got to stand up to these people.
And also Luke, you know, who showed through his mastery of the Force, like, even if I am not actually doing it, I'm going to provide a visual, a myth, a story for these troops that survive to leave Crate in The Last Jedi and say like, oh, did you see what Skywalker did? Like, that becomes this mythic thing where Luke Skywalker the subject of the story in a very meta way, uses storytelling to save the day. He creates that scenario, and Kylo has so much rage that he can't even see it. And I love that you're saying, it's about community, because and that's why I think the sequels build so well thematically on the originals and prequels, is that the prequels is about the danger of isolation. Palpatine as a predator and as a manipulator is able to succeed by, in that, I think it was Justin Bolger, who's a great guy and used to work for Lucasfilm. He said that Palpatine, in a similar way to Heath Ledger's Joker, it's this, we're going to bring you down to our level. Like that type of thing with Harvey Dent, is that he takes Mace Windu, right-hand man of Yoda, paragon of the Order, the greatest swordsman that the Order ever had, and he turns him into he's too dangerous to be kept alive. No trial. Gonna kill him right here. Space cop. And he takes Anakin, this beloved prodigy, poster boy for the Order. Everybody loved him in the Clone Wars. He's swashbuckling, charming husband, soon to be father. And just by telling him, you're alone. They don't get you. They don't like you. All this stuff, compartmentalizing them, keeping Yoda clouded, doing all this stuff, he can make an Order crumble from within. The originals is about, we put all of our faith under this boy, and then we see sort of what that does to that boy later on in life. He wins the day with the help of his friends, but it's about putting your faith into the King Arthur, into the Aragorn, and all these things. Then finally in the sequels, it's the youth, the people.
Well, okay. Well, that's a great point there, because I think the fact that Skywalker peaked in high school is super real. That's super hardcore real. All those guys with the pot bellies that are managers at some store, but they scored 4 touchdowns. That is a species of person, and that's sort of what he became, especially because he lost a later big game with Grogu, as unless what I'm saying, as you've pointed out on Twitter several times, many people pointed out, it seems like Kylo might have chopped him some Grogu chops a little bit later in the future.
I'm just saying, I will personally fight Adam Driver in real life if he harms that puppet in any way.
So there's that.
I mean, it's gotta be, unless he escapes. I don't know what else.
So his everybody knows that Jedis love them some Exile, and if you want to think of a thing that really drove you into Exile, the most powerful Force sensitive you've ever seen in your whole life comes along, and he comes basically from your bloodline, and you're entrusted to train him, and he freaks out and kills everybody, including the cutest thing ever. I think that would send anybody to Puffin Land. I think that would send anybody there. But also, really quickly, the future him giving himself that last, kind of touch up. He even force projected a better beard on himself and a little bit more youthful. He gave him a last gasp of that thing, just like you said, Alden, to show this thing. I think it's to get the people involved, because zealots versus fascists doesn't work in Star Wars and doesn't work in real life. We cannot have zealots fighting fascists and then all the normal people stand on the side acting like they're rooting for one side or the other, or acting like they're out of the conflict entirely. That is why there was a continuous cycle of violence and fascism in that world, even after their so-called yub victory. That's why, because like Alden's saying, nobody came into that void and set up a great society that would push off fascism, that would push down fascism, that would make it, go away. Nobody didn't made that infrastructure.
I mean, if you want to go into like the, without going on a huge canon tangent, but like in some of that 30-year period, I mean, first of all, we get a glimpse of Mandalorian, with Carl Weathers in that great scene where he's like, well, if you want to go report it to the New Republic, and Din's like, the New Republic's a joke. Like, you get this idea that things aren't great. Like, you can win, and then the next day it's like, oh, so who's passing laws? Oh, we didn't talk about that? All right. Like, it becomes this thing where Mon Mothma demilitarized the New Republic. There wasn't really a fleet. She was trying to look at things in we won, no problems, there's no problems. And Leia was like, they will come back. They will come back. And they turned Leia into the radical left, and they painted her as this warmonger. And then it was like, she's Vader's daughter. Of course she wants to fight some more. But she was right, because we didn't actually teach lessons. We won and then wanted to act like everything was fine, which is the sin of the prequel Jedi too. There hasn't been a Sith in 1,000 years until Obi-Wan fights Maul. And that's the feather in Obi-Wan's cap is, oh, you defeated the first Sith in 1,000 years. But then they're not shaken enough by that. And they're not thinking like, oh, we had 1,000 years of peace, quote unquote, outside of some battles and stuff. But we didn't actually learn any lessons. And getting to the sequel trilogy and seeing Leia now having to lead a splinter group of the government, the resistance is just some senators are sliding cash to Leia because they believe her. We're in this situation now where we haven't actually taught people how to stand for good, which is great about the High Republic books that are happening right now, 200 years prior, is that they are about community, great works, a progressive chancellor working with the Jedi. You get to see sort of their Renaissance period. And it actually made me think, when you guys were talking about Sam Wilson Captain America versus Steve Captain America. And even though Steve's a great guy, he is sort of mythic in his way of, this man was empowered and rose above, and him getting the super soldier serum is kind of pulling Excalibur from the stone and becoming more, and how he was this guy who could literally stand alone in the face of galactic domination. Whereas Sam's first night on the job as Captain America in that season finale of Falcon and Winter Soldier, he is coaching, that side character, that one scene woman of, okay, I'm in your headset. Here's what we're going to do. Stay with me. Let's talk it through. He has that training to de-escalate things and his therapy training, and he is raising people up around him. And I think we're seeing that now in our politics, of course, and in our stories, where Rey is sort of in that tradition, Finn and Poe, of the organizer hero, the hero that can speak to the people. And that's why Zori Bliss, who is Kerry Russell's character in Rise of Skywalker with her rad golden helmet, she tells Poe they win by making you think you're alone. And once that they're able to mobilize is when it finally changes the game. And that's why Palpatine is so, to me, great in that movie, A, as a performance, but also just B, he is every gaslighting white old dude. And what does he try to do in that movie?
Oh my God, Palpatine's my dad.
I mean, well, you gotta go check on your dad, make sure he's not rotting on a meat hook, like in some underground temple.
So I call them Sith marionettes.
Honestly.
But really quickly, the thing about Anakin falling for his jive, though, all throughout canon, and even me to a certain extent, when I saw the prequels, I was just like, this game he's spitting is not good enough to change anybody. I hate this. And I wasn't really into the cartoons because I was just that tiny bit too old. So I was just like, I'm not gonna, well, not like that. Like, you don't watch cartoons as an elder, but I'm just saying in regards to like, I wasn't about to go to like Cartoon Network or whatever the hell it was on and sit there with my fist on my fat chin and watch that shit. That's not what I was going to do to fill in the gaps. So I just saw the movies as they were, took it as they were, and was like, this game he's spitting is not good enough. But if I can allow myself to just get outside of myself and just look at it, I think Anakin's whole problem was, it was regular people are like, is this person going to use me? Oh, if this person's going to use me, then I should stay away from them and just kick it with people who like me. That was never a question in Anakin's mind from the moment he was born. Someone's going to use me. Just God, let it be the right person. He was like a 5-star athlete coming out of high school. They have old white dudes, chiefly, come to your crib, sit there with your fucking mother, and talk to you about what your future is and how many balls you want to catch. Do you want to play free safety, son? All that bullshit.
Yeah.
And you pick one of them to be your fucking daddy for 3 years until you can be good enough to go out on your own and be an NFL player.
And Anakin was a slave.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
He was an actual slave. And he had Qui-Gon Jinn, who, I mean, one of the great Star Wars questions that all fans really love to think about is, if Qui-Gon Jinn had lived, does Darth Vader ever happen? Because he was the guy that really believed and really saw him as a young man, as a boy, and not as a chosen one.
Well,
And
on top of that, Qui-Gon would be like, something's going on with the one guy, and look for other ones, and probably figure out Palpatine way quicker than everybody else did.
Yeah, and that's the thing about Palpatine. You know, building on Ed, your point is that what Palpatine is, what he is selling, good enough? Maybe not. And some of that is also just George. He will admit that he's not a great screenwriter, but he's a storytellers and screenwriters, not the same thing. But what Palpatine is really good at is selling enough and then nudging the stuff that's already being sold for him. So Palpatine is able to look back as a senator and then chancellor who has this vendetta against the Jedi. I mean, that's the revenge of the Sith. He already sees Yoda clouded. Mace Windu is clouded. They're way too entrenched in bureaucracy. They should not have a government presence. They're an order of peacekeepers, and yet here they are standing guard at Senate meetings. Meanwhile, who has a pod in the Senate chamber? A trade company. We've literally given organizations a say, which is the stuff that we're fighting now in American politics. Like, get Zuckerberg out of our lives. That would be like if we gave Zuckerberg a state. So Palpatine sees all this, and he's like, I only need to wink, wink, nudge, nudge, here, there, whisper in this guy's ear, whisper in this girl's ear. And then that 10 years of Anakin training, you see there's some great comics where he will, I'm going to visit the temple today because I'm the chancellor and I should be visiting all my constituents. But it's on the day that Anakin is doing saber training. Then he can stand there and be like, well done. You're the best I've ever seen. You're the best. You're the fucking best. And they underestimate you. Like, he's that guy, building on your coach metaphor. So he is such a fascinating villain. And then by the time of Rey, building on the old white guys trying to control people, he's like, I'm just going to possess you. Sorry. Like, he's gotten to the point where he's past the rule of two, because Palpatine is actually, honestly, a pretty bad Sith. His whole thing is about his own longevity in a Voldemort type way. And, he benefited from the rule of two, took out his master Darth Plagueis. He talks about it in that great scene. But by the time of Rise, he's been in this rotting backup body for a while that clearly can't contain him. He doesn't have a bottom half. He doesn't have fingers. He's just been this Frankenstein corpse with little Sith alchemists keeping him alive underground for 30 years. Now he's looking at this youthful woman who is, of his bloodline. And he's like, I'm going to possess you, control your body. We're going to be Empress Palpatine. You don't have a say. And she resists that. And so he goes to some psychological attacks on her, which is, the first thing is, let me try temptation. You could be Empress Palpatine, because I know you haven't really felt very significant. Then that doesn't work. And then it's, oh, well, your master, Luke Skywalker, beat me because he had his dad. The only person you have here is me. And she resists that too. And then he finally is like, you know what? F it. And that's when, the red baseball cap comes on and he's like, blah, like lightning. And he's like, you're just a scavenger girl. You're nothing. I'm all the Sith. Like, he finally is out of, after everything from being senator, all the way down, all these decades later, the truth has finally come out. And he's finally just like, you know what? F it. Throwing you in a hole. I'm tired of this family. You're doing this. You have no say. The manipulator is finally gone. And standing firm like Superman on Darkseid is what finally brings him down.
Yeah.
Dude. Oh, and that reminds me, I think the worst thing, it's like, it reminds me of like Get Out, where it's like, oh shit. You know what I mean? Like the ultimate is, I hate you so much because you're so awesome. Fuck you. I'll just be you. And put you off in a corner, and like imagine Rey in the sunken place in her own head, watching Palpatine do all this fucked up shit in her body and rule people and harm people.
Oh my God, yeah,
bringing people together. So
it's terrifying, like, and that's such a great metaphor too, because I mean, first of all, thinking about Palpatine, like I would have voted for Obama for a third term. Like that's totally Senator Palpatine. Like that's totally the kind of stuff that he would do. Oh man, get Jordan Peele on like a Sith horror.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, but yeah, like that idea of what is finally going to be end game for the villains as well as the heroes is so interesting, because Palpatine's whole career, it's been about, I'm going to further my legacy as Darth Sidious and Emperor Palpatine, and I will have blunt instruments of destruction like Maul, like Vader at my right hand, and if I ever need to dispose of them, sure. This is a Palpatine that, after being defeated by the one thing he couldn't predict, which was that I hadn't broken this guy enough. He thought Vader was a broken pit bull, from a fight club that he could just unleash whenever he wanted. That taught him something, a bad lesson, but it taught him a lesson, which was I should also just be the blunt instrument. And that's why you want to get a youthful body and things like that. So it's pushed him in an interesting way. And what the Star Wars heroes always have to learn is how to let go. Showing him now 30 years later in a corpse body or a rejuvenated body, refusing to ever just go away in the same way that we see with fascism, is sort of the perfect antithesis to so much of what Star Wars is, because you have Han, who's willing to lay it on the line to remind his son that he loves him. You have Luke, who's willing to go into the next realm, which is, the last part of every Campbell journey is, all right, peace out. I've seen too much. I'm going on to the next thing. And then you have Leia, who's willing to muster her last Force abilities to touch the heart of her son. They're all willing to let go. Palpatine's not. And Rey tells him, like, I'm not going to hate. You're not going to get me to do it.
Yeah. Well, dude, we used to ask back on the old cast, we used to ask what life lessons have you learned from XYZ fandom. I think we just learned which one you learned on this one, because it is like there is a certain cycle of things, and accepting that maybe you're old, maybe you're old, maybe what you're talking about is over. And maybe it's time for you to nurture the youth. It's something Palpatine was never willing to do. It's something that a lot of people weren't willing to do, but the Skywalker line in general and the people around them, like Ben, seem to kind of be into as a default. So like, yeah. I'll help you because I am old. And it's funny that it's like a metaphor for Star Wars fans too, because it's like in 10 years, 12 years, there's going to be people who grew up on the those books you're talking about, the High Republic. They're going to grow up on the Arthurian legend of Jedi and be able to see that in the prequels, they had really become like, they went from Arthurian legends, carrying swords, doing great deeds, to becoming the Office with lightsabers in the prequels. They're literally Dwight and Jim hanging out with the paper factory.
It's having those books. I mean, like, they are such beautifully done Star Wars storytelling. And for anyone listening, we're not that far into them, so you could really catch up rather quickly. And Marvel has a series and stuff. That era has enhanced the entire saga so much, because it's one thing to see George showing us like, oh, the Jedi are way too bureaucratic now, they're way too clouded, they're way too blinded, but we didn't see the heights that they actually fell from. Now that you see them, and even a younger Yoda, and some other long-lived characters in their younger days, like, it adds a level of heartbreak, because you know what they could be. And that's why I think that, as controversial as it is, I completely understand and empathize with a lot of the arguments as to why people don't like Rey taking the name Skywalker. I just think that where a lot of that is approached a little too literally, a little too real world, because Star Wars is a parable. It's not like the Marvel world where that's New York and we put these elements in it. Like, it's not that Rey is like, and I have my own deed now, and I'm a Skywalker, and I own this homestead, and she's not suddenly just, I was never like a Palpatine, like, I'm going to deny everything and just become a Skywalker. It's not that. It's that's an honorific. Like, it lets people know like where you've come from, like who, in the tradition of what, like, these people are gone. They've all moved into the next realm. Luke, Leia, Ben Solo, the Force users, Anakin, they are immortal Force beings now in the netherworld, like Yoda says, like luminous beings. Rey, you're still there. What the Skywalkers did, and I've heard people say this too, like, in the sequel trilogy, all the Skywalkers are dead by the end, so like, what's happy about that? They left the galaxy in a better place and left a champion in their stead. Like, Rey taking on the name Skywalker, to me, is akin to Jon Snow having a sword from Jeor Mormont, or Aragorn wearing Boromir's bracers after he's dead. Those types of things where, and even in the Marvel universe, like seeing Peter and Happy Hogan have that moment in Far From Home where he throws on AC/DC while Peter's putting together his Spider-Man suit. It's those little things of like, oh, wow, we really are the sum of what came before, which is why Kylo Ren is wrong. The theme of Last Jedi is not kill the past. The villain said that. It frustrates me so much when people are like, Ryan Johnson said kill the past. No, he didn't.
He had the villain say it.
He had the villain say it.
Well, okay. In that respect, I'll give you a chance to think about this concept, because what we're going to do right now is toss out your Star Wars pitch, a thing that you would do if you had control over Star Wars. And in this moment of you thinking about it, I'll say you said it best about how she gains her name. That's why, and I know this is one of your takes, but it's one of the take I've had for a long time. That's why it's not bad that Han Solo gets his name on screen in the goddamn Han Solo movie. Because let me tell you something, Mean Gene. Talk about Anakin was a motherfucking slave. Who are the people of what you call it? Corellia.
Yeah.
Who are the street urchins of Corellia if not slaves? They have no lineage, especially him. He had no family, was a dust kid, scrabbling on his own, had just had his first name, which probably somebody smacked him with their hand and called him Han or something back in the, that's how he got his first name probably. And he had no last name, and he's going through a situation where, like, it's the first time he's traveled in a situation where you'd have to have a first and a last name. Ever thought about that? That's like a kid's first time on a plane kind of thing is what he's going through in that moment. And the guy says Solo, and guess what? He was Solo for a long time and got used to being Solo, and he got over it in New Hope and helped cause a renaissance of the universe because he wasn't
like,
Solo.
Again, like the comparisons and like the parable of our real world, like that sort of fascism of like, these are imperial ports of entry now, and we're gonna label you how we want, is so like, you come from a Russian country and your last name is like, it's like in John Wick, how in John Wick 3 they reveal that John Wick is short for Jordani Jojovovich, and that John Wick is just the Americanized version. Like, that's what the Empire was doing. Like, yeah, we don't need all that. Solo, that's your last name.
Right. And just
well, can I also say, as a kid who has been through multiple versions of abandonment, I think this stuff is so interesting because it also says you choose who your real family is. You're not stuck with what fate has given you. You can choose your family. And to me, as like I said, as a person who's been through a bunch of crazy stuff in their childhood, that's a huge deal. I mean, I'm not changing my last name by any stretch of the imagination, but my last name does not make me who I am. The people I choose to be around, the way I choose to behave and treat others is what makes me who I am. And I think that's a huge part of all of Star Wars, is looking at abandonment. I think abandonment, it's way, way more prevalent in that world than we think it is. And so, Anakin, like, no one addresses that he's been with his mom and is the only person he's ever had in his life, and now he's forced to not have her in his life. And that's a big deal.
Couldn't. And it's also like the tragedy of a broken promise. He says, like, I will come back and free you, Mom. Of course you say that. You're a child. You really do believe and hope that you can, because you're being taken by this Jedi Knight, and you think that you're going to have the power to do that. And then you get wrapped up in a system that doesn't allow you to give back. And so for Anakin's then children and his grandson to, Ben Solo makes good on the promise of, Anakin throwing a tantrum in Attack of the Clones. Like, I will learn to stop people from dying. His grandson does do that. It's just that Anakin was coming at it from an I need place. And the redeemed Ben Solo is, I just want this girl to live. It's not about me. And once you accept that it's not about you, that's when he is able to bring her back to life. And Luke and Leia, his children, do raise up somebody that was a nobody, and they are able to free her from her scavenger life, from her life as a Palpatine. And and I love that you brought up the Solo stuff, because like any good Western hero, Billy the Kid, like Jesse James, like all those guys, they got their name from the establishment and turned it on them. Like they created their own legend. So yeah, this guy calls him Solo as a snooty little joke, but Han takes that and creates the Han Solo legend. We know he's a goofball. We know he's really not the best shot. He's really a very lucky pilot. He's not that smooth. He talks his way out of most things. But the aura of Han Solo is created there. And building on the tapestry argument that I always make, then you go to Force Awakens, and it's Rey and Finn. And she says, "You're Han Solo." And Finn goes, "The rebellion general?" She goes, "No, he was a smuggler." And all Han says is, "I used to be." He used to be Han Solo. He feels like he lost what he made. So by the time he gets back into his groove in that movie, he's reclaiming something that he built. And then you go to Charles Soule wrote The Rise of Kylo Ren. It's a beautiful 4-issue series that's about sort of Ben's fall, picking up the Kylo Ren mask, and sort of those last days of his previous life. He tells Snoke, when Snoke is seducing him in one scene, "Did you know that I was named for a Jedi that I never knew in Obi-Wan, and that my last name isn't even real? He made that up." He looks on it with disdain, whereas really it's about, that old adage, like, life isn't about finding yourself, it's about creating yourself, and about choosing those paths. So even though Han doesn't really have any abilities that are outward facing, he is a creature in the living force, and Han saves the galaxy. This guy who just took lemons and made lemonade with that name. The galaxy wins because Han Solo goes left when he could have gone right. He's like, "Oh, damn it. All right." And he goes back and saves them.
Well, and you see just really quickly, that dovetailing back to my criticism about Finn earlier, if there was people that are going to be, "Hey, I'm just so great, and I came and I'm just great, and everybody knows I'm great because of my name," it ain't going to be black people. If there's people like that, it's not those people. The more likelihood is you will have to deal with what someone labels you. You will have to deal with what someone decides you are and rise above that to create your own thing and be respected as your own thing. And that's why I saw him as a Han Solo type. And I thought that there was just some way to like do a little bit of that stuff with him. And of course, there's a little bit of that in there when he gets with the other stormtroopers and stuff. Although I feel like that could have been dramatized a bit more in regards to him being like, "Yo, I'm a legend because I'm the dude who broke out of the programming." Well, we did that too. "Yeah, but I did it first, and you guys know about me, right? So then I'm the RZA of this Wu-Tang clan of stormtroopers, and you guys will rap over my beats and we'll get rich." You know what I'm saying? And march under this flag. And all that to say, creating yourself, speaking of creating yourself, if you had free reign over Star Wars, what do you think your ultimate, not on an ultimate, but like what's a fun Star Wars pitch that you have that you've always wanted to chop up on air?
It's so funny because I've thought about a few of these over the years. I mean, everyone has. I mean, especially if you've RPG'd at any capacity. But the thing that's been in my mind a lot lately is that, and again, like, I love that Star Wars plays in different genres. Like there's some Star Wars that is like I love Filoni Star Wars, partially because I grew up on that stuff. But yes, he's the student of George, but he also injects a lot of weird in there. Like, spoilers for the end of Rebels, but like space whales save the day. They're called Purgle. They're awesome. There's wolves that can travel through physical space, and we're not really sure how they do it, but it's awesome. And so there's like stuff like that. The weirdness. Taika Waititi about to do one. He just said the other day, like, "Oh, it's going to be very me." It's like, what does that mean? Like, is it going to be the first Star Wars movie that's just talking? Like, I'd love that. Like,
I
Star
love
Wars
that
movie.
idea.
Yeah, that was just like two guys on Coruscant, like two guys, one crazy night, like a road movie or something like in Star Wars. Like, what is this going to be? So every time that they play with different genres, I get really excited. Obviously, the Ahsoka episode of Mandalorian is straight up Yojimbo. Robert Rodriguez's episode is, a shoot 'em up. I would love to see a Force thriller, sort of like a magic-y, with a Jedi character, but it being about sort of those themes of and there's Hamlet throughout Star Wars, but failure, sort of like a runaway type character, somebody who left what was sort of like a high and mighty life as a Jedi Knight. And it got me thinking about the Jedi Temple Guard. And the Jedi Temple Guardsmen are these masked warriors that turn in their actual lightsabers and their actual robes and everything, and they wear these white and gold masks, these white and gold robes, and they all have yellow saber staffs. And anonymity is their strength, in that they guard the Jedi Temple and sort of give up they go like the extra level of commitment. And I think, and they do that with the masks and everything. That way their identities can't be compromised and all this stuff. And I think that a story about a Jedi Temple Guardsman who, out of a crisis of faith, tries to take that extra step of like, well, if I get closer to my vows and closer to the Force, then everything will be fine. And then it's his identity that gets compromised. And maybe 3 or 4 of his, brethren or sisterhood,
Yeah.
maybe a few of them get wiped out because somebody saw his face or something. And then it's like, oh man, I've got to run away now. I leave in shame. And then it's like, it's not about sort of how much do you commit, how many times a day do you pray, how much are you willing to show that you're a member of the order. You always were, and what happened is not your fault. And honor them by doubling down on you, not trying to erase you, because there are some things in Jedi lore. There's this thing called the bearish vow, which is probably the most extreme, where it's a Jedi that's like, I got to remove myself from society altogether. And they go and just meditate on mountains and stay out of war. They did not show up for the Clone Wars. They did not show up for anything. And they are alone. Like, you don't bearish vow next to someone else. You find your own place in the galaxy and you peace out, live off the land. And I think that a story refuting some of those things, and maybe this character learning that, no, you should pick up your purple, pink, green, blue, whatever saber, and embrace who you are, come back, help, not bring down who killed your brothers out of vengeance, but out of wanting to honor them, show up again, sort of like in a Simba type way, get them a nice, like, remember who you, like, that type of thing.
Yeah.
I'd love to see a story like that.
Cool.
Yeah, any sort of disgraced person high up in the Jedi in the Jedi leadership or whatever, like you said, like the guard type of stuff, coming back and having to prove himself against like all these like great odds. And I just would if I had that in that story, I would just throw in a Shigur Sith character, just unstoppable, unkillable asshole person who's like, you're a regular guy who's like 9 to 5 was being a priest holding your thing in front of Buckingham Palace type thing.
Yeah.
And now you got Shigur after you while you're trying to, so that, maybe, I don't know, that it's a lot of, I love having characters have their own internal struggle. Like, I have to like either own up for a mistake I made, make something right that was wrong on my watch, whatever. But also there's these people that are there like, I don't care that this is very important to you. I'm going to murder you with these 8-sided lightsaber nunchucks that I have.
Exactly. And like,
just sell some toys.
Your battle is like, can you forgive yourself? Is the sort of the conflict of this character in my mind. But then there are those things that they really don't want you to forgive yourself. Like they don't want you to get over it, and they want to, like, they are that heel character, like, fight me, come on, like, you feel bad about the fact that they all died, like, wow, sucks, your fault, let's go. Like, those people that bring out the worst in you. It's what I loved about WandaVision. It's Wanda going through this whole grief process, and then there's this character in Agatha Harkness who's like, yeah, but really you're unstable and you suck and it's your fault and you're this, and they are the people in your life that are not there for your growth. And I think that those are some of the best villains. It's why I like Kylo Ray. It's why I like Obi-Wan and Maul. Those great Star Wars rivalries, even if they do get a little steamy, those great Star Wars rivalries are built on somebody saying, you're not what you think you are. You're a fraud. That's why Maul and Obi-Wan's final confrontation in Rebels is so beautiful, because yeah, it's literally a 3-strike duel, because most of the fighting happens beforehand in words. And Maul tells him, "You're just a rat in the desert. You're a failure." He doesn't say this, but it's basically, haha, I killed your master. I killed your girl in the Clone Wars. I'll kill whoever you're trying to hide and protect now. I'll kill all of them. And Obi-Wan just stands there calm, and he's like, look what I've risen above, and look at you. You came to find me, yelling and screaming, looking like a moron. Like, that's where he beat him, you know, is in I changed and you can't.
Well, dude, you've definitely shown Star Wars as a potent carrier of metaphors. We thank you so much for coming on the broadcast here. Let people know where they can find you out there on the interwebs.
Yeah, so you can find me personally on Twitter and Instagram at AD_Strider, or on Instagram at A.D.Strider. And then you can find my show, Ahch-To Radio, Star Wars podcast, and that's where I do Star Wars interviews with different people around the Star Wars space. People that work for Lucasfilm, people that have fan projects, people that are writers, analysts, different type of people. We've had a couple different performers on there and stuff. And it's a really fun show. And on that feed, you also get a couple other Star Wars shows that I either am on or produce. My friend Tori Fox has a show called The Mandalorian Creed, and she breaks down these different Star Wars topics on like a multi-part series.
Nice.
She did one on droids, she did one on lightsaber mythology, and we're going to be doing a Star Wars Rebels rewatch on a third show on that feed, which is coming up. And then I'm also on a show called The One and Done Film Club, where we take all of your favorite mega movie franchises, everything from your Harry Potter to your Narnia, MCU, DC, everything. And we break down those franchises, but we only choose one movie to stand and represent the entire thing. Ooh. And so you're also making the argument of what is the bastion of this franchise. So, for example, Indiana Jones, we decided as a group that Last Crusade would represent Indiana Jones.
You are correct. I just want to interject and say that is absolutely right, because I've watched a couple movies that jack Indiana Jones' Stee, and they jack stuff from 3. They jack so many things from 3. It's quintessential Indiana Jones.
It's exactly, and that's what we do. And then whatever movie we decide is going to be that inductee, we do a commentary on that movie.
Nice.
In that moment. And yeah, so, and then there's other projects and stuff, you know, radio stuff. You like 90s music, you live in Florida, I produce a 90s station. That's all well and good. But yeah, you can find me sometimes in the comments of Reboot It videos too.
Hell yeah.
that is true, and we do thank you for your presence on there, because you are healing light on that a lot of the time, man. You for real, you really have a good concept of what we're trying to do. You don't try to send us comments that are like, why aren't you more what I thought of? Because you have your own projects, and I think a lot of people would do well to follow your example.
I think that's a big, not to throw in a last tangent, but on that note, if anyone takes anything from anything I've said, it's this: what you want is not what anyone is in the business of. And if they are in the business of trying to give you what you want, it's probably not going to work out well. People that are in the business of making something that they think you could possibly connect with, but they're going to swing for what they believe in anyway, that's the good stuff. And you don't judge a thing based on what it's not. You judge a thing based on what it is, and if that works for you. Some people aren't going to like every Star Wars movie or Star Wars animated series or whatever. But I encourage everybody to talk about the things that you're watching or reading and say, you know, they did this in this episode of Mandalorian, and I didn't really care for that. You don't go in and say, well, they didn't have an appearance from this character from this comic, and that's why I didn't like that. You don't go into something like John Wick and say, weren't enough musical numbers. That's not what they're making. You know, you go in and you take what they actually did. So when you watch an episode of Reboot It, I don't ever go into an episode like that and think, even the Star Wars one, which was such an interesting challenge. And there's so many things that I remember from that, like Leia as a Kylo Ren sort of apprentice and things that you guys did. Like, it's not about what I would do. It's about what this person would do and whether or not that works for you. And so that's just, there's a huge thing in criticism. Any review for me that starts with, I wish they would have done X, is already bankrupt. So, yeah.
Absolutely. We talk about some of that sort of stuff on a Patreon, like expectations and what you expect out of movies, and like the times that we expected something and didn't get it and why, blah blah. But we get into that on the Patreon because this feed should be for light and love and good spirited debate. We get negative, we get nasty, we get insular, we get whatever on the Patreon. We also do things that don't fit this format. But I think you're an example of what should be a regular Greatest Pod feed episode, dude. A well-reasoned critique of a whole thing, a comprehensive conversation, and we really thank you for being on, Alden.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate it. Again, you guys have had a murderer's row of guests, and some of those pitches, like your Vader episode of Greatest Pod, I was like, what madness is this? And then I listened to it, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And
Kevin Hearn is smart.
He's a smart guy, really smart guy. I got up his books. And that's the other thing is that you learn so much. So if you're listening to this episode because you like Star Wars, go listen to like the Mark Andreyko Dracula one. Go listen to the X-Men one with Danielle Radford. Like so many of these things, like there's a connective tissue. Even if you're like, I'm a fan of this thing, like expand.
Yeah, agreed. Also join our Patreon, patreon.com/thegreatestpod. You can get those extra pods that are a little more personal, and you can get art sent directly to your mailbox that is super great from Ed and not so super great from me. That being said, there's also another project I'm working on. It's called John Wick the Musical. So
I'm here for it, man. I'm here for it.
With that being said, I just want to thank you all for supporting us and for listening to another episode of The Greatest Pod.